What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Kilo Loco, and today we're going to be working with Flutter. So today is day 2 of 30 days of Flutter, and I decided to put out another video. So we're actually going to be creating another application today, and it's going to be a tip calculator. So we're going to be dealing with user input, and I'm also going to show you how to implement some math operations. So there's a lot of cool little things in here. If you're new to programming, this is going to be a great tutorial for you. So with all that said, let's go ahead and jump right on in. All right, so as you can see, we got this nasty boilerplate application all set up and running. All you need to do is just create a new Flutter project. I'm just gonna go ahead and delete all of this. And we need to, once again, create my app and my app state. So let's do that now. All right, so as you can see, we created my app, and we also created my app state. We're also returning my app state right here in our create state function. If you're confused about any of this, make sure you go back and you watch the last video where I explain it. Now, last time we did it like this, and that's perfectly fine. This gets the job done and it works every time. But I just wanted to point out that there is a shorthand for this, which means that you could write code that looks a little bit sexier. And the way that you do that is you use the arrow operator. So what we're going to do is, instead of having this function that just returns this one line, we can actually replace it with the arrow operator and then just create this object right here. So let's go ahead and do that now. And just like that, you have a really nice tight line of code that just, it works every time. Oh yes. So we have created my app state, right? Now down here in my app state, we need to focus on the build method because we haven't implemented anything here. Now remember that we need to make sure that we're going to make a material app, and inside that material app for the home, we're going to be working with the scaffold. And there we go, another nice tight line of code, right? So next what we need to do is we need to think about, how do we want this app to be laid out? Well, we know that we're going to have a bunch of widgets laid out vertically, and we want to have them stacked on top of each other. So let's go ahead and add in a column for the body. So we have our column, and now we need to enter in some children. Just so that we could get something shown onto the screen, let's go ahead and add in a text widget that says total amount. And there we go. So we have our text widget. It's going to say total amount, and then we're going to add a couple of things below that in a couple of minutes. But just so that we can make sure that our app is looking as we expect it to look, let's go ahead and run the app. All right, and here's our beautiful, but not beautiful, it's actually disgusting, our disgusting app. So as you can see, total amount is showing up here all the way at the top left, but that's not what we want. Remember that when we're working with a column, it's going to put all the elements all the way at the top and then work from there by default. So what we need to do is, once again, we need to wrap our column in a center widget that will put the physical column that goes up and down in the center of the screen. And then we need to adjust the main axis alignment of that column to make sure that we do get our widgets starting from the center of the screen. And there we go. So we wrapped column with a center widget, and then we added a main axis alignment parameter in here. And now if we go ahead and save it, we should see total amount right there in the center. Looking so much better so quickly. I love it. All right, so we have the total amount, right? Now what we want to do is we want to give the user the opportunity to enter in some text. So what we need to do is add in a text field as one of the children of our column so that it will be below our text widget. So let's add that in now. All right, so we have text field. If we go ahead and save it, we should see this line. This is going to represent the text field. The problem right now is that if we try to enter in anything in here, it will display, but we won't have any way of getting the text out. So what we need to do is we need to add a text editing controller that's going to be a property on our my app state. So we can actually hang on to the value that changed inside of our text field. So let's go ahead and add that now. So we have our controller up here. It's of type text editing controller. And then in our text field, we can just pass it in for the controller argument right here. And there we go. So We won't be able to see any difference if we go ahead and do a hot restart. We won't be able to see any difference in the behavior of our widget, but we will be able to access the text from this controller in the future. So just keep that in mind. Another thing that I want to do with the text field is make it so that our text is in the center, just so that it's not like all the way over there to the left. So let's go ahead and add some text alignment as well. All right, text align, and it's looking much better now. And if I go ahead and delete all the text in here, what I want to show to the user is a hint of what they're supposed to enter in. So let's go ahead and add in a hint to our text field, and we need to do that with a decorator. So we have our input decoration being passed in for the decoration argument, and we're going to specify that the hint text should be this string. Now we're getting an error right here because what we're doing is essentially adding string interpolation into this string, right? And what string interpolation means that we're trying to inject some type of value into our string to be displayed. Now that's not what we want. We want to simply just show this this $sign and then $100 after that, right? So in order to avoid this problem, because we actually want to show this $sign, we need to prefix it with a backslash, and there we go. So let's go ahead and save it, and now we can see our hint. And whenever we enter in a number, we're going to see that the hint goes away. It reappears as soon as the field is empty. Looking good so far. Another thing that we also need to keep in mind is what happens when we're looking at the keyboard. So if I bring up the keyboard with Command K for the iOS simulator, then you're going to see that we're going to be shown a bunch of letters, right? The normal keyboard. And what it should be showing is actually a decimal keyboard. So for our text field, we need to change the keyboard type. So the keyboard type argument takes in a text input type, and we want to be using the keyboard that allows us to enter in decimals. So we're going to use number with options and then specify that decimal is true. If we go ahead and do a hot restart, we should be able to pull up our keyboard, and now you can see that it's the keyboard that only allows numbers to be entered in. So now we could just enter in something like 50, 45 or something like that, right? Whatever amount that you decided to pay. So this is looking good. And then the last thing that I want to do to this text field is just, we got to chop this line up. This is ridiculous. It's going from one side of the screen all the way to the other. We need to get rid of that. So we're going to actually wrap our text field with a sized box widget. So I'll refactor, I'll do wrap in widget, and we're just going to type in sized box like so. And the sized box has an argument that we could pass in for width, and we could just specify that we want this to be, we'll say about 50. Let's save it and let's see how big it is. That's looking kind of good. It's a little bit too small for me. I think it's going to be a little bit longer. Right there. Looking nice. I like it. I like it a lot. So now we have our text field all set. Looks good. All right, so we're able to enter in that amount, right? Now we need to specify what tip amount that we want to actually use to calculate the total tip that is owed, right? So we're going to be working with toggle buttons, which is going to allow us to choose from 3 different options, or however many options you want to add in there. We're only going to do 3. We're going to have 10%, 15%, and 20%. So let's go ahead and add a toggle buttons widget to our children's list of our column. So we can see here that our toggle buttons takes in some children. It's going to be each of the buttons, and each of those buttons is just going to be 10%, 15%, or 20%. Now, in order to finish creating this toggle buttons object or this widget, what we need to do is pass in a isSelected array. So we're going to be working with a list of bools, and that's going to essentially determine whether this button is selected or showing as highlighted, and that's going to help us determine, what tip amount we're going to be using once we do the calculation. So up here at the top, we need to have a new list of bools. So as we can see here, we have a list of booleans, and we're going to call it selection. I'm going to start off by having the first one be true and the last two be equal to false, which means that 10% is going to be selected by default. And then after that, we're going to essentially update it based off of what the user does when they tap it. So now for the is selected, we could just simply enter in the selection. And if we go ahead and save that, and yep, there it is. That's our toggle buttons right there. So now what we need to do is work on only being able to select one. So we want to add in a new argument to our toggle buttons, which is on pressed. And we're going to add a function in here that's going to handle our selection. But instead of doing all this right here in the middle of our widgets, let's just go ahead and create a new function that's going to handle that for us. So we have this function called update selection, and then it's going to be passed in a selected index, which is going to be an integer. That's the same signature as this pressed function is expecting. So as you can see, it's expecting a function that's going to pass in an integer, and it's called onPressed. So that means that we're able to simply pass in the update selection as the argument. So we're going to be doing some kind of dense logic inside of this function. It's going to be only a few lines, but it is a little bit dense. So let's talk about what we need to do. We need to take a look at our selections array. We need to loop through or iterate through each of the items inside of our selections list. And then we need to determine if it's the selected index, which means that it's either going to be 0, 1, or 2. If it's that selected index, then we need to update its value. So let's say that we select 15, right? That's going to be the 1 index. And then when we do our loop, or when we iterate through this array, we need to say, is this index, which is 0, equal to the selected index, which is 1? That's going to be false. We would update this to false. We're going to check this one when we iterate over it. This index is 1. Is it equal to the selected index, which is 1? And that's going to be true. So this is going to be updated to true. Same thing applies here. And this is once again going to just be false. So let's go ahead and add that function in with a for loop. All right, so this is our for loop. We're starting off with an integer called I, and we're going to set it equal to 0. We're going to run this loop for as long as I is less than the value of our selection, which is our list of booleans, the length of it. So right now the length is 3. That means that we're going to start from 0 and we're going to go all the way up to 2 because it's less than. It's not less than or equal to, right? And then I++ just simply means increment after you're done with this loop. So we're going to increment to 1 and then to 2. So with that being done, now we just need to implement that logic that I was talking about, where we need to check if the selected index is equal to the current index, or I, and then update our selection value based off of that. All right, and there we go. One line of code, nice and tight, looking clean. So we're going to check our selection array. We're going to get whatever index we're at, which is 0, and we're going to update that value. So once again, we're going to check selected index, which is going to be 1 if we hit 15. So is 1 equal to 0, and it's going to be set to false, and then it's going to go through that logic. Now we're going to be updating the state, and we need to let Flutter know that we're doing that. So we need to wrap all of this in a set state method. And there we go. So now we're going to make sure that we're setting the state. And if we do the hot restart, we should be able to actually see that we have a single value selected, which is 10. It's starting off at 10 because, as you can see right here, it's true, and then false, false. When we hit 15, we can see that it shifts the selection to 15 and then 20. So now we get the single selection going. Looking good. I like it a lot. I don't like, however, how close it is to that line. You see that? So let's go ahead and wrap our toggle buttons in some padding. Yeah? Yeah, I think so. All right, so there we go. We wrapped it in some padding. We set the edge insets to all, and we'll just set it to 20. And if we save it, bam, pushing it up. Get away from me. I don't like you. All right. That's looking a lot better than it was before. The last thing that we need to do is simply add a calculate button so that we can, obviously calculate. So let's add that below our toggle buttons. All right, and there we are. We have our flat button in there, and it's a nice green color because it means green like money, and your money's going away, so it should probably be red. But anyways, we have our onPressed function right here, which is not implemented yet. We have the child, which is the text widget, the background color, which is green, and then the text color, white. Looking really nice. So once again, we don't want to put our logic up here alongside the widgets. It's just going to look extra nasty. So let's make another function called calculate tip. There we go, simple function like that, and it's going to match this signature right here. So let's just add it in as the value right here, calculate tip, like that. So what we want to do is first we need to get the current index of our selection and find out, okay, which index are we working with? Are we working with 0, 1, or 2? Then we need to actually turn that into a decimal value that we can multiply by. So we need to turn it into 0.1, 0.15, or 0.2, and then we need to multiply it by whatever the user enters in for the total amount. From there, we need to also have a value updated in our state. But let's go ahead and focus on getting some of these values and doing the calculations locally before we start working with the state itself. All right, here we go. So we have a couple of complex things going on right here, and I'm just going to walk you through it before we go any further. First, we're going to get the total amount. So remember that we're able to get whatever the user enters into our text field through the controller, and we can access the text from that controller, which is the string that they typed in. Now, what we want to do is we want to turn what the user entered in as a double. So we're going to parse this into a double, and that will give us a final amount, which is of type double. All right. Next, what we want to do is we get the selected index. So we're going to loop over our selection, and we're going to get the first index where this statement is true. So what's happening here is the element is going to be whatever type of element is inside of the list. In our case, it's a list of bools. So this element is going to be a Boolean. The where part of this function is saying we need to check the first element where it's true. And since we're working with Booleans, we're just going to get the element itself because it's going to specify true or false. So we can just do the arrow true or arrow element. So it's going to be whichever one that is iterated over and is true. Hopefully that makes sense. Next, we're going to get the tip percentage. Now, like I said, the tip percentages equate to decimal numbers, which 10% is 0.1, 15% 0.15, and 20% 0.2, right? So this is another list of doubles. Then we're just going to get the index, whatever that selected index was that we calculated, we're going to get that index. So it's going to be either 0, which is going to be this index, 1, that index, or 2, which is that index. So then we'll have the tip percentage that we're supposed to multiply by. Now let's go ahead and get the tip total and turn that into a string. All right, here we go. So now we have our tip total, which is calculated by multiplying the tip amount times the tip percentage, right? This times this. And then whatever that answer is, we're going to convert it to a string with a fixed decimal point. So we're specifying 2 because we only want to have 2 percentage points. We want to only round to the hundredths place, right? So that's why we're doing 2 string as fixed and then 2. Next, what we need to do is we need to create a state property up here at the top that's going to hang on to the tip amount. So I just want to hang on to like, $20 or however much the tip amount is supposed to say. So it should say $20.00 or something like that, and we want to hang on to that value. So let's go ahead and create a tip string. Okay, so we have this tip right here, which will be able to hang on to that state. And since we will be updating the state, we need to wrap this in the set state function. And then we can just update our tip to the new tip total. And there we go. So all done here. So I just want to go over this one more time just because I know that this does look kind of weird. Remember that this is going to be like 20.00 or 15.15 or something like that, right? And that's what that number is. So we're using string interpolation, which once again, that means to just inject a value into a string to display it by using this $sign. This second $sign right here, and this first $sign is like the $sign that is specifying that this is in dollars. So you could replace this with pounds, rupees. You could replace it with I don't know, sterling, silver, whatever. You replace it with whatever. This is just a regular string. You replace it with an emoji if you want. I don't care. But this one that's preceding this tip total, which is a variable, that is actually saying we're using string interpolation right here. So just to clarify that part. All right, now we have our tip, and we just want to display some text at the top of our screen that says what the tip is. So let's go ahead and add that. And we already know that we're probably going to need some padding, so let's add that in too. All right, so I added a little bit of spacing right here just so that you can see it, but we added this if statement. So once again, we're just going to be checking to make sure that tip does have a value before we attempt to use it, right? Remember that red crash, that red screen of death? We don't want that. And then we're just going to wrap our text, this text widget, in some padding, looking good. And then we're going to have the text just simply display whatever is in tip, whatever value we set down there in the update tip function or the calculate tip function right here. So whatever that value is, we're going to show it right here. And then we're just going to make this in some jumbo letters. So let's go ahead and save that. And now if we enter in, let's go ahead and enter in 100. Let's see if the normal use case works. 15. So that should be $15, right? So calculate tip, and we can see 15 bucks. What if we try to do something a little bit more extravagant, like 92.71 or something like that? So calculate, and that's 15. What if we do 20%? Then looking at 1854, what about 10%? And I could do that off the top of my head. That should be what, 927. So looking good. I guess I do know math. So that's going to be it for today. I hope that you enjoyed the video. I wanted to show you how to interact with user input, also get the toggle buttons going, and then do a little bit of math as well. We don't have to be geniuses at math, but it does help, just knowing how to do some math, because you're going to end up doing some math somewhere down the road. But anyways, that's going to be it for today. I hope that you're enjoying the 30 Days of Flutter challenge. Now go out there and keep coding passionately.